This week's talk, the West Bath Historical Society presentation, is by joint authorship of Linda Henderson and Frank Connors. And you see the title, Fisher's Store, The Life and Times of Alonzo G. Fisher, a significant person in both West Bath and Bath. Until very recently, I didn't know Frank, but Linda was in frequently in the history room, looking up, doing research on this. So let's get started. We're going to save all your questions and comments till afterwards, and both Linda and Frank will be available to handle your questions. And there are things to look at afterwards up in front. So Frank Connors, your turn.
Thank you very much, Peter. A word first. I got into this today because it's been my delight to be married to one of Alonzo's granddaughters for a long time, and to know Linda. Linda's just a sweetheart, and she's just a wonderful resource. How many are here from West Bath? Uh-oh. Well, we live in Brunswick now. Our history is with the Bodenham Historical Society, but my hat's off to what the Patent Library has done with their history room. I know they have a lot of, we've been stuck in the past. We've used the Patent History Room for some wonderful things, and they're just a wonderful resource, very professional resource to have. So anyway, here we go. Alonzo Fisher was born in Chicago, Illinois, of all places. 1884 was the year. This is the picture that this is how I would remember Alonzo. He was very slender, very sober, very rigid, not a great sense of humor. I guess can we say that, Linda? Yeah. True. Yeah. And but also a wonderful sportsman. He was a Bath City councilor. He was an entrepreneur when it took some real imagination to be one. And but I think his first love, one of his first loves, certainly was his dogs and his guns and his hunting. This is a picture of the original Fisher family. Father is right there. Also Alonzo Gustavus Fisher. So our Alonzo, who's right there, is a junior. His brother Theo is right there, and his mother Fanny is right there. And this was taken probably in Bath, and I'm going to say it was 1892. We don't know who most of the other people are. We're still working on that, aren't we, Linda? This is Alonzo G. Fisher, Sr. Thank you, Carrie. I'm sure everybody in the room knows Carrie Nelson but me, right? Well, I got to meet her about 2 weeks ago when we started to put this together, and she's just a wonderful resource for doing her work with PowerPoint. My experience with PowerPoint is pointing the little green pointer. So, thank you, Carrie. And so, a word about about Alonzo Sr. He was born in Barry, Vermont, in 1839, and his early experience, he drove a little tinker's wagon around New England, selling first tin goods and stuff like that, and then he went into patent medicines in a cart, and in 1876 he relocated himself to Chicago. Chicago had been burned practically flat 3 or 4 years before, so he saw an opportunity, and and he did very, very, very well for himself in Chicago. He became a real estate developer. He got real big in the patent leather business, patent medicine business, and was very well to do. Jane and I went off this fall and found when he died, he was carried back to Barre, Vermont, and buried. We found his grave out in Barre this past fall. This is Fanny. Fanny's, we don't know a lot about her. We know she's a Bath girl, and so we have to think that she is probably the reason that the Fishers came to Bath. Alonzo Sr. used to like to come to Bath and vacation, and I think he probably came here to vacation because of her. This is Alonzo Jr., Lonnie. Looks kind of serious. He's probably about 10 years old here. Very serious guy. This is the Fisher family home in Chicago. I put it up here just because we made an enlargement of this because we were trying to figure out if there's anything in there that you could actually use on a daily basis. There's a lot of stuff. I like to call it culch. And but look at it. There's the leopard skin on the floor, and the chair that you wouldn't quite dare to sit in, and all these things in the cabinet that, I'm not sure you'd use them or not. But obviously a very well-to-do family. They had some nice things. This is Fanny. This is Fanny, and she has the boys. And they're, of course, eating a meal, and are set up to eat a meal. And it's interesting, she's the only one wearing a bib. You notice that. But they had gas lights. They had all the trappings of a very successful family back in the Victorian era. This is. That's Alonzo Sr. right there, and Fanny right here, and we get Alonzo and Theo mixed up sometimes, but we're thinking that's probably Alonzo. He tended to be blonder than Theo, but where this was definitely Bath, and we're thinking that they may have been down looking for some summer property in Bath. But nice little family grouping. So they did buy some property. This cottage is called Theolon. Had a short but very useful existence in West Bath, Foster's Point. They bought 6 acres of land for $650. Just so if you think you're doing good with a land buy these days, that was a very good one. And it included good piece of shore frontage. Actually, the point, I believe, of most of the point of Foster's Point, the short point of Foster's Point. And he called it Theolon for the two boys, Theo and Alonzo. This is a close single shot. Anyone has any idea what that little thing is right there? I'm assuming this was probably the comfort station, and this I'm just thinking it may have been some sort of an ice house serving the kitchen or something. But it's a beautiful old cottage, and didn't last very long because the Fishers let it go quite early, and after the family lost control of it, it was torn down so something bigger could be built on the site. This is a side angle of it, and I put this in here because it shows the barn, and the barn is still down there on the point. Very much part of the Foster's Point landscape. This is the hired man, which would be this guy, and Theo and Alonzo Sr. at Foster's Point in front of the big barn. they obviously had stabled horses, and that's a pretty fancy little coach that they're riding in. It has side lights and all sorts of amenities that you don't often find in Maine wagons of those days.
And the dog.
And the dog. Where's the dog? Oh yeah. You know, there's almost always a dog in a Fisher family picture. Okay, last shot of Alonzo Senior. This is a great little story. He's that's him right there, of course. It was called a naphtha gas fueled cruiser. Whoop. I have a big thumb. And it was called the Dirigo, and she was part of the State of Maine exhibit at the World's Fair or the Columbian Exhibition in Chicago in 1893. And the story is, and it's a good little sidebar, we won't get into that today, but after the exhibition was over, the State of Maine building was purchased by the Ricker brothers and brought back to Maine on a freight train and re-erected up at Poland Springs. And this boat, being also a part of the exhibit, was purchased separately by Mr. Fisher, who obviously had some wherewithal in Chicago in those days. And he used it he brought it also back to Maine by train. We think he brought it to Portland and brought it back across to the New Meadows River. And we like to claim, at least, that it was probably the first powerboat on the New Meadows River, very, very early. Beautiful little boat. And Alonzo used to say that you would light the engine with a match. So, I'd like to see that done sometime. Alonzo Sr. died unexpectedly on December 7th, 1894, and he was 55 years old. And there are a number of lengthy obits. One of them says he rose a penniless boy in the Green Mountains of Vermont to become one of Chicago's wealthy and prominent men. And we won't spend a lot of time on family relationships this morning, but after he passed, Alonzo stayed in Maine with private boarding homes and private schools, and Fanny and Theo went west to seek their fortunes. This is Alonzo. He graduated from Bath High School in 1900. Alonzo always had an affection and a reason. Was always seeking a reason to get down to the river and spend time at the New Meadows. He was early recognized as one of the best people to get you up through the channels and tell you where the ledges were and that sort of thing. But so he always loved the river, and this is one of the reasons. This is Blanche Williams. She was a West Bath girl, and apparently attracted his attention. Isn't that a great shot? Yeah. She's aboard the Bombazine. This is about 1905, and just imagine having that beautiful dress with all those skirts and things, and just sort of go for a ride in the river. Okay, so this is probably the most published Fisher family photograph that we've years and years ago we put it in the Times Record, and I know that it's in it's in the History of West Bath, and it just keeps popping up, and it's Alonzo and Blanche, of course. We don't really know where they're going, do we, Linda?
She was going to Morse High. She's got her school books and all that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
She's dressed like that for high school? All right. Okay. Farm in the background. Belonged to Blanche's parents. It still stands in West Bath and is owned by Paul and Chris Quill now. So they're headed towards Bath when this picture was taken. Is that right, Linda?
Yes.
Yeah. And Linda says, well, that little piece of road. Whoops. Sorry about that. This area back here was the area that was notorious for being soft and muddy and nasty. And we know in 1904 that the Bath Independent, again, thank you, Carrie, says that Alonzo bought a 16 horsepower Rambler. Now, I'm not going to say that's it, but if there's somebody in the room that can say it's not, then we'll go with that. But it's a 16 horsepower Rambler, 1904, brand new. And, in those days when somebody bought a car, you got your name in the paper. So,
Is that OSHA approved?
I think so, yeah. So this is Alonzo on his way, likely on his way to Popham. It's the same car. We were trying to figure out the license plate. I think it says 85. And back in those days, cars were sold, licenses were issued numerically. So I'm not going to say this was the 85th car in Maine, but it was certainly one of the early cars in Maine. So, and he made the Bath Independent again, and it said that he drove from Popham's Riverside Hotel to Bath in 52 minutes. I guess that's better time than you make with a horse. And does anyone here know where the Riverside Hotel was in Popham? No idea. You do?
Down there, just
By the river.
below Spinney's, between the Coast Guard station and
Oh, okay.
Spinney's, on the
So
river,
it's quite a ways down, yeah,
all the way.
yeah. Okay, moving right along. Here we find Blanche with their firstborn son, who was a Philip, and a dog. We don't have a name for the dog, do we, Linda? No. Okay. But who can resist one more good automobile picture? This is probably that low spot in the West Bath Road that everybody complains about. But this is Blanche, and this is Philip over here, and there's the dog, sure. And this is a cousin,
That's her brother, anyway, Elliot. Yeah.
Blanche's brother,
Yeah.
Elliot. Okay, yeah. And it looks like she started to shovel out, thought better of it, probably got on a cell phone and called AAA. Yeah. And you notice that is not the same car as the previous one. This one's a little bit bigger and a little bit more prone to the mud. Maybe that's the Rambler. Okay. In 1913, the Fishers bought this house, corner of Washington and Oak Streets. It had been the Independent again said that they intended to use it as a residence, and it had been a business at one point called Ye Old Sagadahoc Tea Rooms. And their second child, Barbara, was born here in December of 1914. There's another view of the same house. But Alonzo always had his eye on Foster's Point. I have no idea what the vintage of this picture, but this is came from Steve, didn't it? Steve Winter?
Yes.
Yeah. Who's, I suspect some of you might know as a very devoted very devoted Foster's Point resident. But this is, Alonzo just always had it in his heart to live and work and be a part of the Foster's Point community. In 1909, we get word from the Bath Independent that he was building a boathouse on the point. And West Bath historian William Purrington said that he was opening a store on the point in the same year. So I'm going to stick my neck out here, and Linda's probably going to jump up and tell me I'm wrong. But this boathouse, I'm thinking might have been already there, and it might have been the boathouse that Alonzo Sr. used for the old Derigo, and because this is a very early shot, and I'm thinking that the first little store that they opened was right here, sort of testing the water. But very, very soon after that, they built the general store on the point. And Carrie, still here? Tell me what you told me this morning about the builder of this store.
George Brigham, who had a home down at Foster's Point, built the store for Alonzo. The store was built in the spring of 1909, and the article said the boathouse was built in October of that year.
Okay. But as you can see, it's a very, very substantial store, and it was, I think it said, does that say groceries on the front right there? Yeah. Linda brought a ledger from the store. It's over here on the table in the corner, and it gives you an idea of some of the things that they had in there. But I wrote down a few. Groceries and gasoline, penny candy and fork-dipped chocolates, and canned goods, fresh baked breads. The one that caught my eye in the ledger over there was Moxie. He sold a lot of Moxie. And so he had I think he had a real knack of knowing what people wanted and what he could sell, and he brought it down to the store, and they had a good business there. They had the first public telephone in 1912. There was talk about having a little post office there, but it never. He was probably a member of the wrong party or something. I'm not sure. That didn't happen. But anyway, he had a good business there and ice. They had a wonderful little ice cream parlor. He or our crew would harvest ice every winter, and this is before they had electricity on the point. So they used the ice for the ice cream and for drinks and to service the schooners and the boat, all summer long. A couple places I saw, they were putting up 150 tons of ice every year for a number of years. So that's a lot of ice. Okay. We doing okay for time, Peter?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna read you a little piece here. This is in 1915, which was about the height of the use of the store. They made the bath times again, and while the Fishers owned the store, there was a matter of interest and intrigue that was reported Bath Independent in September 25th of 1915. The headline reads, "Suspicious Characters at the New Meadows." And the story reports, "A week ago Sunday, two strangers appeared at the store of Alonzo Fisher at Foster's Point. The two apparently arrived on one of the boats of the regular transportation lines on the New Meadows River. The pair immediately endeavored to arrange with Mr. Fisher to take them out to Flag Island, which lies at the mouth of the New Meadows River." Now, if you're familiar with the river, the New Meadows the Flag is way out there. And he didn't know it that day, but Flag Island had just been recommended to the United States government as quoting the Bath Independent here, a site for a flying station to be the base of aerial recon along the Maine coast, particularly with a view to the defense of Portland and the Kennebec River. I guess they finally settled on Brunswick for the Navy base, but at that point, they were considering Flag Island. So Fisher described the men as fairly well-dressed, but he added, "They looked to me like crooks." They spoke English well, he added, but they might well have been foreigners. Their conduct was very peculiar, he said, and they evaded all questions in regard to the subject of their trip. Fisher said they hung around the place all the afternoon. He said they were persistent, often withdrawing beyond earshot to talk earnestly together, then returning with a new proposition or a new set of questions about Flag Island. About 6 p.m., they seemed to give up their project. Then they engaged Mr. Fisher to rush them to Bath in his automobile, which he did, where they boarded the Boston steamer and were gone, never to be heard from again. Just a few days after their visit, Fisher said that he first learned of the possible new military importance proposed for Flag Island, and that is when he surmised that the guys must have been German spies. It does seem to be a reasonable theory in respect for the anxiety to the visit, which was lonely, to this lonely and uninhabited island, of which few people outside the immediate neighborhood had ever heard of, but it was also a good way to generate a little business for the store, perhaps. So, about 1920, 21, the economy had turned on the little store on the end of the point. More people in Foster's Point in the area had their own cars, and so the Fishers started to split their time between West Bath and Bath, where he had started a couple of other small businesses. He operated the store for a few more years, but by 1926, the land and buildings went out of the family, and in 1979, let's see, 1979, when high winds and high water came, and this was the last little vestige. It went away I think it was a winter storm, not a hurricane, wasn't it?
It was
Yeah,
honest.
yeah. Oh, that was the big storm of '79.
Yeah, it took
Yeah.
Land's End.
Yeah, sure, yeah. So, went out to see, notice how they spelled gasoline.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool. I guess we've been spelling it wrong all these years. You need to think for a minute as the New Meadows as a tourist destination. These were very much, we gotta do this one last time. This is just an old picture that I threw in there because I have this sick sense of humor. But it's an old postcard, and the line on it says that this is just before we hit the ledge. So Alonzo was always telling me how he knew all the currents, but he wasn't on the boat this morning, I don't think. But they did hit a ledge, and that's not the Dirigo, but it's one of the other launches of the river. Okay, now we get to think of the New Meadows as a tourist destination. This is the New Meadows Inn, of course, the original New Meadows Inn, and it was the heart of a flourishing tourist business. You could drive there, you could ride there on a train, you could ride there on an electric car, you could ride there in a horse and buggy, you could walk there, people did, or you could ride by boat. So just think of it. Linda has a menu over there from the New Meadows. You could buy a seafood platter for like $6.95 in those days. I'm not sure how much Moxie was. Do you know, Linda? Cheap, yeah. But Alonzo always liked the river, and he was a part of a little business called the New Meadows Steamboat Company. This is his crew, another vehicle. We're guessing that Alonzo's not in that picture, that he's taking the picture, but there was a cluster of boats that did all sorts of things. They carried freight, they ferried passengers, they had goods up and down the river. And let's see, there's the Bombazine, which we've already seen, the Bull Rock, which is named for the Bull Rock Bridge, and the Aliquippa, which was named for that's an Indian name, I believe, But they would, this is the steamer Gurnett at the Gurnett House, which was part of that little circle. But you need to think of that whole New Meadows Basin as just a tourist attraction. You could bring a boat. You could get on a boat and go to Bath, do whatever you wanted to do. I mean, go to Portland. This was a Portland boat. This is Alonzo aboard the Bull Rock, and he's at the New Meadows Landing in East Brunswick. That looks, I think that's the gable end of the inn right there. But they did cruises all summer long. This is the Aliquippa, and she's coming into the same landing. This is the Bombazine down here in front of us, I believe, right there. And Carrie came up with a name for that. That's the Grandview House on the New Meadows. And if you look, if you're very, very careful, was the Grandview right beside the Bull Rock Bridge? Right beside it, yeah. The Bull Rock Bridge, one of Brunswick and West Bath's earliest bridges, crossed right about where the Sawyer Park is, the boat launch is now. Go down in there sometime in the spring and check out. You can see the old stone abutments and stuff. It's a great area. Okay. Would you go on a Sunday ride with those two guys? I mean, really? Of course you would. I think that's the Bombazine as well. But these were all they were all inboard gas or naphtha powered boats, and it became quite a business. You can see that right there. That's the steering mechanism, and must have been really neat. Okay, now we're going to go back to the store for a second. This is the three unidentified young ladies from Camp Eschwag, and there was a camp immediately to the right of the store, and a couple. There was a camp over on the Bombazine side. There's several summer camps for both boys and girls in the New Meadows, and it was a great part of the business for the store, I'm sure. I showed this because notice the cement and the pipe post. Alonzo is always very, very proud of this. He told anyone who would listen that it took 225 bags of cement and 700 bushels of sand and gravel, all delivered by a schooner, to put that cement ramp into the store, for the store. There's another one. And I just noticed this morning is somebody's looking out the door. Wonder who that is. Okay. So the Fishers lost this. The store lost their store in just before the Depression. By this time, Lon had moved a lot of his business interests into Bath. He had a sporting goods store, he had a bicycle store, he had a grocery store, he had several apartments that he was renting in various buildings. So he relocated to Bath, and they bought this little house. Was this new when they bought it, Linda? I'm thinking it might have been. A sweet little house on Park Street, still there. This is more like today's picture of the same house. So the A.G. Fisher Company was located at 247 Water Street. He sold bicycles, he sold sporting goods. I think he was still selling bait, a few other things like that. Whoops, got ahead of myself. This is daughter Marjorie out in front of the Park Street. Oh. Now we go to the sporting goods store. That's Alonzo right there. You notice the bikes hanging and a little bit of everything.
Cash register.
That store's still there?
I have no idea where 247, this was,
That's in a wooden building and they're all dead now.
yeah, I would say it's probably, my guess is it's probably gone. There's a reference in the Bath Independent to one of his stores being resealed and refloored because the town had just come through and raised the street, so they had to raise the building afterwards. So I would doubt it, but it's, the address would be 247 Water Street, so that's the lower end of Water Street. And Water Street, speaks for itself, I'm sure, so. So by 1924, Alonzo had trying to keep the summer store open, and by 1926, he sold the bulk of his property in West Bath. There was more unsettling facing the Fisher family, however. The Great American Depression cost Fisher most of his Bath business, and so he went to work for the Forbes family and on Nashon Island off Woods Hole in Massachusetts. That's the Forbes home, not the Fisher home behind him. Great picture, though. At various times, it's all still there, I believe, isn't it? Still owned by the Forbeses?
Yes.
Yeah. There is a great family story about this too. He is Captain Fisher. We've talked about lighting engines with gasoline, with matches and stuff like that. At one time, he had just pulled one of the family vessels one of the Forbes family vessels into a dock, and when he went to restart it, it caught fire. And this is not it, obviously. That's the Avalon. She was a sailing vessel, and he had two passengers, Mrs. Forbes and her personal secretary. And Alonzo was able to pick her up, Mrs. Forbes up, throw her in the water and save her, and the secretary was killed. So there's a I think it's in your book over there, isn't it?
Big explosion anyway.
Yeah, it was an explosion. Yeah, took the cabin right apart, and I believe the secretary was in the cabin, and Mrs. Forbes was outside of the cabin, but it's made news on the front page of the Boston Globe because of who it was. And Alonzo was burned and scarred that same day trying to save both the women, and he was scarred for as long as I knew him. After that, okay. He was a caretaker at the Forbes estate, which means he stayed there pretty much year round. Do we know the name of that donkey? Does Fran know the name of that donkey? Is it a donkey or is it a mule?
Donkey.
Okay. We know this is Siam. It was one of the Forbes family horses, and that's Barbara with her. And this is Philip Fisher with Siam still, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at various times, the whole family went down. They worked as domestics in the summer. They did all sorts of things. Obviously, Philip was trained as a pharmacist, but he wasn't using those skills that day. This is the whole family. There's Philip, and there's Marjorie, and there's Barbara, and there's Blanche, and there's Captain Alonzo. We have a couple of those. So Blanche and Marjorie and Philip, Alonzo, Philip, and Blanche, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Ah. Okay. Look at those swimming suits. Aren't those great? So Philip, Marjorie, and Barbara. Okay. The other, I mentioned earlier that that Alonzo's love of hunting, and we'll finish this morning with some pictures and some stories about that. But he was remember one year he after I had come on the scene, he announced that if he went duck hunting just one more morning on Merrimack Bay, it would be his 60th consecutive year of duck hunting. So yeah, I took him. But this is not us. This is him in a real Merrimack Bay gunning float. I don't think the timing is right for that to be Philip, but we put that on there. And he had a couple of those boats that I remember, and he was just loved to hunt. And he's pretty good at it. It's a string of whistlers. You don't know how to get whistlers around here much these days. So. Couple of geese. And these are raccoons. Sure, that would be that's Alonzo. And I bet they probably didn't go dressed up hunting like that, or hunting dressed up like that, but he'd love to go. I think he was 90 years old when he was hunting up in Woolwich when he got in trouble with his car and had to go looking for him, but he would rather be hunting than doing almost anything else. That's a good shot. I think Dave Burke took that shot. And of course, he was a fisherman. And I'll leave this up long enough so you can all read those rules. Something about cleaning trout for 50 cents a dozen. So. We don't know why that is, do we, Linda?
No.
Okay. Okay. There he is again. Look at his waders and his shotgun and his little felt hat. And this is Blanche and Alonzo in 1957 on their 50th wedding anniversary. They had been married 68 years when Alonzo died in 1975. And she died in 1984 at the age of 96. And I'm going to put this slide up here if you have any. So I'd like to thank you all for your attention this morning, and I much appreciate your interest in what I consider a real American success. He was a real businessman. I mean, anyway, at this time, perhaps granddaughters Jane and Linda will join me down here. Linda's already down here, Jane. And we can weather any questions that folks might have.